What are our running back and quarterback rankings looking like for week one? It's time to break it down right here and right now as we begin another edition of Locked On Fantasy Football.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Greetings, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. As usual, I'm your host, Vinnie Iyer. I'm not doing this. I'm writing about NFL and fantasy football for sportingnews.com. I'm one of your co-hosts here.
Hey, I'm Michelle Magdziuk, researcher for NFL Network and fantasy analyst at NFL.com. We are both wearing red today, and I'm sporting my Zach Moss sweatshirt in hopes that we get some good news about his injury today.
Yeah, so it's a red rankings day here for you. So we're getting into the red. We want to get into the black as well and get some guys that are going to put us over the top in our fantasy football leagues. Before we do that, I got to tell you that this episode of Locked On Fantasy Football is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase there. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Now, Michelle, it's exciting. We're going to dive in here to our running back and quarterback rankings. We'll get there. Thanks for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen. We're your destination to become the smartest fantasy football player in the league, part of Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day, your fantasy football team every day. All right, Michelle, let's dive right into our running back rankings. I'll let you reveal where we're looking at the top tier of guys this week, and we have a little bit of difference of opinion.
Yeah, so like right at the top, we're pretty normal, right? There's not much to discuss about these guys. You're playing them. You draft them high. That's Christian McCaffrey and Nick Chubb and Bijan Robinson, Tony Pollard, Derrick Henry. And then that's where we start to differ just a little bit, but we're still saying that Joe Mixon and Josh Jacobs are good plays this week, and Saquon Barkley. So not too much to get into with those top guys. But I think where we really start to differ is with Ramondre Stevenson. So you have him as your running back 11. I have him all the way down at running back 19, and I kind of want him lower than that, but I understand he has upside in any given week. So why do you feel so confident about him against the Eagles to have him ranked as a top 12 guy this week?
Well, I think the Eagles' run defense is pretty good. We know that, but they did lose Javon Hargrave, and they're not the same type of defense. They lost a few guys up the middle here, so that's part of it, but I also know that Ramondre Stevenson is the lifeblood of the Patriots offense at this point. They're not going to have a lot of success throwing the ball at all with Juju Smith-Schuster. Going to see some tough corners there. So they're going to have to run a ton in this game and give him the ball. And Ezekiel Elliott's going to be involved. It's a familiar game for him. Of course, he had a lot of battles with the Eagles playing for the Cowboys in the NFC East. But I think it's just a volume-based play. And a lot of these guys early in the season, I am ranking based on their volume and trust that they're going to get the ball enough here for me to do that. And I think Ramondre Stevenson, I think, is a 15-touch guy this week. And the blocking is good enough for the Patriots. So a lot of early in the season is a feeling out period for me, Michelle. I don't want to get too crazy and rank guys that we've drafted kind of in that same spot at our running back spot. And we want to just play them and see what we get. And this is why you drafted Stevenson, to battle through some tough matchups like this as an RB1 for some of you that had targeted tight end or quarterback or wide receiver early.
Yeah, if you drafted Stevenson, you're playing him. And I still have him ranked as running back 19. So I'm saying he's an okay running back 2 type of play. I'm just not thrilled about him this week. We both agree that Aaron Jones is pretty much a must play. You have him at RB9. I have him at RB13. But then we differ again here because my boy, Alexander Madison, just drink every time you hear me bring up his name. I have him as RB12, and I think I have him a bit lower than I normally will because of the Buccaneers is not the best matchup ever, right? It's not a great one for running backs, but you buried him all the way down at running back 25. Why are you so nervous about Madison and his workload in week 1?
Well, I just think this is going to be a passing affair for the Vikings. They're going to realize right away that it's really hard to run the Bucs still, despite losing some guys up front. This is still a nasty defense to run on. So Alexander Madison's a power runner that they need to get going downhill. So I just think it's the matchup based here. And I'm not exactly sure that the volume will make up for it, especially from the way of the passing game and getting enough catches there for Madison. I think this is going to be a downfield passing type affair here with Jordan Addison and TJ Hawkinson getting involved behind Justin Jefferson. So that's why I'm a little lower. Again, I'm not 100% sure on his volume. I don't like the matchup at all this week. And that's why in relation, I have a JK Dobbins, right? Way high on the rankings at 14, because that matchup is pristine here against the Texans, who were terrible against the run last year. I also have Kenneth Walker. We're not certain about his competition here in Zach Charbonnet quite yet. The Rams are pretty terrible. The Rams on the other side are going to have to lean on Cam Akers quite a bit. So these are some of the guys that I have ranked ahead of Madison. A little bit better matchups, a little bit more trustworthy in terms of the touches, at least out of the gate, based on how much their team is going to run and hand the ball to the running back in week 1.
Yeah, I think we're definitely both high on J.K. Dobbins and Cam Akers this week, and we're saying they're good starts. With J.K. Dobbins, it really just has to come down to the matchup, because neither of us were super high on J.K. Dobbins for the season, but Texans allowed the most fantasy points to running backs by far last year. Their rush defense was just so incredibly bad. I expect this to be a blowout for the Ravens, which means there's going to be a lot of scoring opportunities, a lot of run opportunities. And then with Cam Akers, so much of that comes down to if Cooper Kupp misses this game, they're going to have to lean on the run game. And he just ended this season so well last year, averaging 120 scrimmage yards, almost 20 fantasy points per game, led the NFL in scrimmage yards over the last 4 weeks of the season. So I think Cam Akers is a really nice play as well. And then one more guy I want to hit on in this first segment here. It's Khalil Herbert. I have him as my running back 10, which is about 20 spots higher than consensus. And, you don't even have Herbert in your top 25. So I'm taking a leap of faith here with him. I really like the matchup. The Packers defense allowed the 5th most yards per carry last year, 9th most fantasy points per game to the running back position. We saw David Montgomery, the starter for the running backs starting for the Bears last year, score over 15 fantasy points in both matchups against the Packers. This should be a heavy running game for both sides of the ball. Like, I love Aaron Jones. I think AJ Dillon's a viable play. And that means I also love the Bears side, right? With Justin Fields running and Khalil Herbert running. And I think DJ Moore can be an okay play as well. But I can't. Herbert, I think, can put up 100 rushing yards and at least a touchdown in this game and be a top 10 running back.
Yeah, the only reservation I have for Khalil Herbert, I really do like the matchup this week. I'm not exactly sure it's going to play out between Donta Foreman and Roschon Johnson. Of course, Justin Fields being in the mix. Now, interesting thing about Herbert, he's an explosive change of pace back, but he's not necessarily the best receiver, and he's a liability in pass protection. So I'm a little bit worried if this game gets a little bit out of hand, the Packers defense playing well, that they'll pull him off the field, because he's not going to give you a lot in that passing game where they would like to keep Justin Fields upright here. So that's my one concern with here. I think he has to get it early. I'll just say that. The Bears have to stay in the game. They're actually favored in this game, so that should help them. But I think the Packers are going to come out pretty well on defense. They're one of my underrated defenses here to start in week 1. They'll be a little bit better against the run. I think they know what's coming with Justin Fields, but the key for them is going to force him to put it up in the air a little bit more. So I do like Herbert. Again, I wish I could guarantee that he's going to see the big share of the carries here, but I think you'll see Foreman and Johnson annoyingly involved more than we would like here in week 1. And I have Herbert, I have Madison on my team, so I'm going to navigate that to see where I'm going to go. But I think I'm leaning a little bit towards Madison just because the volume is a little bit more guaranteed than Herbert, I think, in week 1. So it's hard to know these guys. These are the middle guys. These are the 0 RB type guys. And we were hoping for the best, and we're hoping that the committee doesn't rear its ugly head here and that really hurt the upside of these guys. So we'll get into the second tier guys in the next segment here. Michelle, we have some good debates to talk about there, and then we'll close looking at the quarterbacks, and we have a little bit of difference opinion on that. But this is helping you make those tough decisions in your lineup. But before we do all that, this episode of Locked On Fantasy Football is also brought to you by Harry's. Now, I can't say enough about Harry's. It's my go-to razor here. I get it conveniently sent to me all the time here. It's this cool, comfortable. I can always be set with Harry's, and I don't have to worry about it. They're just going to send me all their products in the mail when I need them. I go to the website and just make sure that I'm good to go on razors and cream and all that. So It's a fantastic experience, and now you can get advantage of this because the starter set is a $13 value for just $3 at harrys.com/NFL. Includes a 5-blade German engineered razor, weighted handle, foaming shave gel, and a travel cover. It's all great for you. You can schedule delivery for refills as low as $2, half of what you pay for other blades. So fantastic. You can also get some great creams, washes, and lotions that'll keep the skin healthy and hydrated beyond the shave. So every blade is always great and sharp for you. Sleek, ergonomic, weighted handles that are going to feel good, look great in your bathroom, and give you precise control with each wipe. So it's a great razor and great products all the way around with Harry's. Highest customer satisfaction in the shaving industry that you'll find. Get your best shave ever this summer with Harry's razors and skincare products. Get a $13 starter set for just $3 at harrys.com/NFL. That's harrys.com/NFL for a $3 starter set now. All right, Michelle, we're going to look at some guys that we're looking at beyond tier one here. Before to that, just a reminder on this network here, the Locked On NFL Ultimate Season Preview is here. The 7-episode extravaganza brings you opinions, analysis, plenty of debate from all 32 of our Locked On NFL hosts with added insights from our national experts. So they can't miss series right now before the season kicks off. Check every episode out right now on Locked On NFL YouTube channel or wherever you get your podcasts. All right, Michelle, we have a few disagreements here. One is on Rachaad White in that same game featuring Alexander Madison.
Yeah, so I think a lot of our RB2s we have similar here where we're saying we're confident in starting them as an RB2, right? And maybe they have even higher upside. So that's Jahmyr Gibbs and Travis Etienne and Najee Harris and James Conner, like Miles Sanders. We're saying those are guys you can start this week and feel pretty good about it. But then we get down a little bit lower to where we're hitting the 20s here. And that's where you have Rachaad White sitting at 20. I have him all the way down at 30, which I'm saying he can still be possibly a flex play if you need him to be. I just am not as confident in him that he's going to put up running back 2 numbers as you are. Why do you feel good about White in this matchup against the Vikings?
Well, I think you look at the Vikings defense, it's just not the same. And you're probably looking at a scenario where Baker Mayfield is trailing in this game. I mean, we know the game script probably calls for some negativity. And you look at Rachaad White, he's a good receiver. That's why they drafted him. That's why Tom Brady kind of handpicked him to be in this offense. So that's still what his role is. And there's not a lot of pass catching targets. I'm not sure that Baker Mayfield's going to push the ball downfield to Mike Evans very much. I think it's a Chris Godwin shorter pass game here and a lot of checkdowns coming to Rachaad White in the second half. So I really like him in PPR and half-point PPR formats. I don't think he's going to do necessarily a lot on the ground, but they're going to dump off, and I think the game script really favors Rachaad White this week, and you might see it a lot of weeks. And again, they don't have Russell Gage. They don't have a lot of targets beyond those 2 wide receivers, figuring out K-Dot and those other guys. So I think Rachaad White is probably going to make a lot of his hay here in that aspect, catching passes, maybe even more so in the end than running straight up for a team that's going to be behind in a lot of games.
Yeah, I would really just love to get to see this Buccaneers offense before plugging in any of these guys. Like if you took Chris Godwin, you most likely are just going to play him. It's a good matchup against the Vikings. It is. It's not a terrible one. They were better against the run and against the pass last year. But I don't know what this is going to look like with Baker Mayfield. He worries me a lot. And I also think if Sean Tucker is active and is involved, he could steal too many snaps. We'll see. Like, I just want to see how the whole thing works before I feel comfortable ranking him up. Another guy that we're both lower on, so we agree here, is Dameon Pierce this week against the Ravens. I personally really like Dameon Pierce for the season in fantasy, but like week 1, it's really hard to stomach putting him into your lineup. Do you agree with your rankings, but is it just because of the matchup or is it because you're just lower on Pierce?
The funny thing is the Ravens defense is not the Ravens defense that we know. There's a few holes in it, but one of the holes is not their linebacker core in the inside here. And also think of the game script. Again, you got to think about that. And we're going to bring that up a lot when we're looking at ranking players on top of the quality of the matchup. Is Dameon Pierce is not a big pass catcher. He's okay in that capacity, but I think you'll see them exploit more the secondary of the Ravens. The corners are not very good for the Ravens. They do have a very good safety in Kyle Hamilton, and they've got 2 guys there, Roquan Smith and Patrick Queen, are going to get after it. So I think you'll see some Tank Dell maybe in the middle of the field, and they'll have to maybe throw from behind here. Dalton Schultz might have a little bit of a tough time here with Hamilton on the other side. So I just think up the middle, I'm not that interested in these kind of close line players, so to speak. I think getting the ball downfield, CJ Stroud, they're going to open up a little bit. So the Ravens pass rush, a little suspect. So I think all the game script says whether they're behind or early in the game, they're going to have to throw a lot. And I think the Ravens will shut down the run and take that away early.
Yeah, I'm not even sure if the Texans score a single touchdown in this game. I also think this could be a game they don't even put up 200 total yards as a team. Like CJ Stroud having to go to Baltimore in his first ever start is going to be rough. And it hasn't been a pretty preseason for him either. It's not like we've seen like this consistency and we're like, okay, maybe he can do it. I'm just worried about this whole offense in this particular game. Pierce will have to be used a ton as a receiver to hold fantasy value. That's something I'll be looking out for the usage in that. But I would really like to sit him in week 1 if possible. A guy I seem to be much higher on, Raheem Mostert against the Chargers. Now, I have him as running back 25. I would be happy to push him up if needed. Like I keep talking myself more and more into Raheem Mostert this week. You don't have him ranked as a top 25. I don't know if he's a little bit lower than that for you. Maybe someone that you're considering starting, but I really love him against the Chargers this week. The Dolphins do have great weapons, right? But it's 2 guys. It's Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, and then really nothing else. So their next go-to play, it seems like it would be to run the ball, right? And Raheem Mostert is pretty much the only healthy guy left there that they're going to trust. And we saw Mostert have a lot of solid games last year. 11 games with more than 10 touches. He averaged over 13 fantasy points per game. In those matchups, 5 games with more than 15 touches, average 18 fantasy points per game in those games. The Chargers allowed the second most rushing yards to running backs last season. So I like the matchup. I like that. I think he's going to, get 15 touches in this game. And he's a very viable RB2. And I'm starting him over guys like Rachaad White and Dameon Pierce this week.
Yeah, I'll consider Raheem Mostert there for sure if I'm stuck with those guys potentially, but I think I definitely play White over him. I'm a little bit concerned that I think this is probably going to have the highest passing volume of any game this week. I think they're just going to go back and forth, slinging it here. This is great if you have the quarterbacks here too, and Justin Herbert and the receivers. It's just going to be throwing a ton. So I'm not sure if the game gets out of hand here for the Dolphins that they don't have Jalen Ramsey. So that could be a problem here early. If they get behind, they're going to be fine. Raheem Mostert is not going to be involved that much in the passing game. They'll just take him out, and it'll be the Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle show. And I think Mike McDaniel would easily pivot to that. So, again, that's my concern here. I think there's a path for him to get 15 touches, but I'm hoping they can stay in the game a little bit here because I think the Chargers, Kellen Moore, they're going to step on the gas here. And we'll get to Justin Herbert, I think, in our last segment there.
Yeah, we absolutely will. We have 2 more guys to talk about here real quick before we move on to our quarterback rankings. I just wanted to hit on Dalvin Cook and Breece Hall of the Jets. I mean, these are 2 hard guys to rank like for the year and in week 1 because we just don't know what the usage is going to be. They said they're going to take it slow with Breece Hall. I do have both of them ranked inside my top 24. I think you can start either of them as an RB2 this week. Obviously, I wouldn't want to start both if I happen to roster both. Like I'm just choosing one. But you have both of them outside your top 25. So you don't feel good about starting either one this week. I do. I think this is going to be they have a really high over under in like on DraftKings for this game, but I think it's going to be a lower scoring game. I mean, divisional rivals, good defenses. I'm still happy to play Josh Allen and Aaron Rodgers if needed, but obviously Josh Allen. I'm saying if Aaron Rodgers if needed, not Josh Allen. But I think Dalvin Cook and Breece Hall are going to get a good amount of carries, a good amount of touches. We know Hall can take it to the house on any given touch. So I think he provides upside there. He is risky. He could give you nothing, but I think he provides enough upside to start him. And then with Dalvin Cook, I do think he's the lead back here. He gets the majority of the carries. He gets the goal line work. So I'm also okay starting Dalvin Cook in this matchup as well.
Yeah, we're wearing red, and this is a game that screams red flags to me, where it is the double dose of I don't know who's going to touch the ball more, Breece Hall or Dalvin Cook. I don't like the matchup at all. I mean, this is brutal for either side, I think. So this is why I don't get the point total necessarily in this game. They're two good defenses here early. They're stacked. They control a lot of things all over the field. There's good corners. There's decent pass rushes. So I don't know how these guys are going to get done when scoring a ton in this game. So I want to fade a lot of people in this one, definitely in DFS. But when looking at Dalvin Cook, Breece Hall, I hear Breece Hall is healthy. I hear he's not healthy. Dalvin Cook is healthier. What's going on here? I need to wait and see a little bit. Again, if Dalvin Cook was not in this mix, I would say fine, Breece Hall all the way because of the volume, but I just don't know in this game. Same thing with James Cook and Damian Harris. I mean, the game could just be Aaron Rodgers and Josh Allen trying to run around and manufacture plays here after things break down. So I'm not buying this, especially in the matchup being so tough this week.
Yeah, so that was our running back rankings. I hope we helped you there. If you have any questions, feel free to hit us up. We're going to get into our quarterback rankings. I have two surprising quarterbacks ranked over Joe Burrow. I'm excited to talk about that one. But before that, we got to talk about the Gametime app. Buying tickets to your favorite events shouldn't be stressful. Gametime is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all sports, music, comedy, theater near you. With killer deals on last minute tickets and their best price guarantee, you can stop stressing over the tickets and start getting hyped for the fun you'll have. Listen, even if this wasn't a sponsor, I just love the Gametime app. They remind me of such a great time in my life when I lived 10 minutes from the Steelers stadium. I would just wait like an hour before the game, jump on the app. I know I'm getting the cheapest tickets. I can see where I'm sitting. They're going to come straight to my app. It's super easy. And then I could just walk to the game. It was a blast. So it is truly the fastest growing ticketing app in the country for a reason. You get images of your seat before you buy, so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. Buy tickets in a matter of seconds, 2 taps, and you are set. Tickets are sent directly to your phone, so you never have to dig through your email. Snag the tickets without the stress with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use Locked On NFL for $20 off your first purchase. Again, create an account and redeem Locked On NFL for $20 off. Terms do apply. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, time to hop into our quarterback ranks for week 1 of fantasy. No shocker here at the top that we have Patrick Mahomes and Jalen Hurts and Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen, like Justin Fields. Those are some of our top 5 running backs, right? You drafted them, you're playing them. And then also Justin Herbert. I will say, though, I have Herbert as my quarterback, too, behind Patrick Mahomes, which if Kelsey doesn't play, Herbert may jump up there. You have Herbert down at 6. You're still saying to start him, but I'm much more confident. You were just talking up this matchup like crazy. Why is Herbert 6 instead of ahead of Lamar, Hurts, or Allen?
Well, I think, again, those guys have – I mean, Lamar Jackson, we know the matchup is fantastic against the Texans, and he could do whatever he wants probably against that defense. So he's there. Mahomes, I might have to reconsider sliding down Mahomes, but I think Jalen Hurts and Josh Allen, they're going to have to pass and run to get their teams moving because I think just the traditional running game is not going to be there. And Justin Fields is Justin Fields. He has that high floor. So I think all these guys can have big weeks, and that's why Justin Herbert is down at 6. I don't think I'm slighting him. I just think that there's potential that the numbers are up. And again, sometimes I'll base it on how we drafted, and this is how we look at it. And I think this is a little bit higher than I would normally have some of the guys this week. I mean, I think it would not be surprising if we see Jalen, or looking at Justin Herbert, I should say, up there with Jalen Hurts and Patrick Mahomes more regularly than Josh Allen even. So we'll see how this plays out. But again, I think that's a pretty high rank. It says start him and you're going to get a big game from him this week, no matter how you slice it. But I'm interested. You have a couple guys as well higher than Joe Burrow. We both have buried Joe Burrow a little bit. I have him at number 8. You have him at number 10. In between, you've got Geno Smith, Dak Prescott, and Sam Howell. Well, I've got Trevor Lawrence there ahead of Joe Burrow. So explain yourself, Michelle, on that one.
Yeah, I mean, I think we talked about Joe Burrow a bit in yesterday's episode. I'm worried about him coming off the injury, his mobility, the Bengals defensive line to be able to create pressure. In the last 3 games against the Browns, they held him to a very, not good fantasy day, a couple of very meh days and one really bad day over his last 3 games against them. So I do just think they know how to play against Burrow, and with the injury, that just scares me off a bit. Obviously, if you drafted him, you probably are still going to play him. I just don't think he's going to have a huge week. And I have Sam Howell at quarterback 9 and Geno Smith at quarterback 7. So 2 guys I'm considering, maybe if they're on your waivers or on your bench, considering starting them this week. With Geno Smith, listen, he was a quarterback 5 last year, and he has an absolute amazing matchup. I don't think I can overstate just how juicy of a matchup he has against the Rams this week. He led the league in downfield passing touchdowns last year, right? Geno Smith did. The Rams allowed 10 scrimmage touchdowns of 30 plus yards last season, tied for the second most in the NFL. And then they went and lost 8 defensive starters, 4 from the secondary from last year. Of the 25 current defenders on the Rams roster, only 5 of them have started 10 plus games in the NFL. 16 of the 25 have started fewer than 2 games. So 0 or 1 starts, 16 of their 25 roster defenders. This team is so incredibly inexperienced. I don't know how they're going to stop DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett and Jackson Smith-Njigba. I'm going to have at least Metcalf and Lockett ranked super high. So in that case, I really love Geno Smith this week. And with Sam Howell, he just also has an amazing matchup to start the year. I'm super high on him. I've talked about him all year long. And he gets the Cardinals, who allowed the highest opponent completion percentage and second most passing touchdowns last year. They also lost a ton of pieces on defense, including their top 3 pass rushers this year. So I also think Sam Howell is a really good play in week 1.
Yeah, my only concern actually with those 2 guys and my guy Trevor Lawrence is these games getting out of hand and there's just no competition right on the other side. Sometimes you want that competition like in the Tua Justin Herbert situation where they're going back and forth and slinging. I'm not sure you're going to get a fight from Matthew Stafford without Cooper Kupp, and I'm not sure you're going to get much from whoever the Cardinals start at quarterback. So that's my concern. But I will say this, Michelle, same thing with Trevor Lawrence. I think they have a higher floor this week than Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow always has a high ceiling, but I think these guys could get our 250-2, get out of here. We're confident we have an easy, good start, right? Sometimes you'll take that, but sometimes it's not that exciting. So when you look at these teams that are just handing the ball off here. But overall, I think just weighing this, again, you want a little bit of resistance. That's what I call it, where you want the other team to put up a little bit if you want those really big games. But if you want a solid game, I think you would go in that direction. And I think that's how I feel about Trevor Lawrence this week. I think these guys are all fine plays, definitely. And one guy we're both out on this week. I'll quickly get into the other side of this matchup with Dak Prescott. I have him at 10. You have him at 8. Not much deviation. I'm not a fan of this matchup at all, really, for either quarterback. Daniel Jones on the other side. I think these defenses are pretty darn good. It's a primetime game, again, division rivalry game, just like the Jets-Bills game. I don't know you're going to have the premium points here, right? So that's why I slid Dak a little bit lower this week, and I have Tua higher than him. But Daniel Jones, absolutely brutal. Just not a lot of points against his defense last year. He's going to be a little bit running dependent for his numbers, and I don't want to go there. I want to see what we get. I really do like Darren Waller in this game, but I'm not sure a lot of other things are going to work well for the Giants.
Yeah, I like Dak Prescott this week. I have him at quarterback 8. I think he's going to be a fine play. I'm not worried about the Giants defense at all. But with Daniel Jones, such a tough matchup for him in week 1. He was held to 14 and 13.7 fantasy points in his 2 matchups against the Cowboys last year. And that was even with him having 79 rushing yards in one of those games. He had 79 rushing yards and still only scored 14 fantasy points. That is nearly impossible to do for a quarterback. So very good job, Daniel Jones. But the Cowboys are just a really good defense. They allowed 17 plus fantasy points in just 5 games last year to opposing quarterbacks. And then they traded for all-pro cornerback Stephon Gilmore to make their secondary even better. So there's just no way I feel comfortable starting Daniel Jones this week. I'd much rather pick up and start Sam Howell than risking it with Daniel Jones in this tough matchup.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's the way to go this week. You just don't force guys in the lineup that there's tougher matchups, and you should have a lot of alternatives unless you're in super flex and you're locked in pretty much for the 2 quarterbacks you drafted. If you're in a single quarterback league, you should have options. And Michelle, is it fair to say that you can always pivot? Do you say I'm starting a certain number of guys every single week, or are there guys that, okay, I have a high upside backup? For example, in one league, I do have Sam Howell or Jordan Love this week. Do I consider those guys as much, or do you kind of just play it with, if you drafted one of those elite guys, that you play them no matter what each week?
Yeah, if you have the Mahomes, Jackson, Hurts, Allen, Fields, Herbert, like you took them early and or Burrow even, right? You took them early, you're playing them. Like you spent that draft capital on that quarterback, you're playing them every week until they show you like, okay, I cannot play this guy, right? If they end up stinking all year long, you have to sooner or later move on. But you start your studs. That's what you do.
Yeah, and don't get too cute in week one. And that's what we're
Yeah.
going to follow through with our wide receiver and tight ends as well. I mean, go for someone who's going to touch the ball, talented, where the path to points are, and that's how we're going to do it. And then we'll have a complete breakdown just like this for wide receivers and tight ends. So good conversation for sure. It's good to analyze why we have certain guys up and down each week, and we'll do that for you in the middle of every week here during the regular season. Thanks again for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen every day. Again, we get our back half of the rankings analysis for you tomorrow. Then we'll look a little bit ahead to DFS there on Friday as well. So a lot of good stuff coming on the show. We're Locked On Fantasy Football, your destination to become the smartest fantasy football player in your league. For Locked On Fantasy Football, this has been Vinnie Iyer.
And I'm Michelle Magdziuk. Bye, y'all.